You're listening to Inside the Village, where all news is local and no topic is off limits.
So help me, Bob, it's bully in the alley. Hey, bully in the alley. So help me, Bob.
Back for another episode of Inside the Village with Michael Friscolanti, editor-in-chief here at Village Media. I'm Scott Sexsmith. Derek Turner with the week off. Drew Armstrong at the controls for this program. Okay, is it just me, or were we not just sitting here?
Yeah, we just sat down here, didn't we?
I know. And of course, today is Monday. We came into work Friday. T-shirts, jeans, set to kick back, fire up the weekend, maybe get out a little early.
Maybe you get out a little early.
But it seems that Premier Doug Ford had other plans for us.
Yeah, huge news on Thursday, obviously, as everybody in Ontario has seen. The Premier apologized for what happened with the Greenbelt scandal over the last 10 months, said he was very, very sorry. They're going to put all the Greenbelt land back. Huge development, right?
Yeah.
And kind of like the peak of a scandal, so to speak. And we thought it'd be great to have someone on here who could explain to us sort of what's gone on the past 10 months.
Right, because today, of course, marks the kickoff of the fall sitting at the Legislature. So no better time than the present to do that. Charlie Pinkerton from the Trillium joins us on a special episode of Inside the Village when we come back after this.
Reporters, editors, and journalists who go the extra mile to get the story and get it right. Go behind the scenes with those who cover the stories that matter most to you and your community. Look for it in the Village Features section of your favorite Village Media website across Ontario.
Welcome back to Inside the Village with Michael Friscolanti, editor-in-chief here at Village Media. I'm Scott Sexsmith. It has been nothing short of a wild 24 hours in Ontario politics, and we're pleased to have with us on the line from the Trillium, Charlie Pinkerton. Charlie, good to see you again. I guess it's been a busy few hours for you.
Yeah. Well, a few hours, days, weeks, months.
Years. Now, Charlie, let's start. I understand you had a pretty good drive from Toronto to Niagara Falls. Now, as you were on your way there, did you have any inkling whatsoever that Premier Doug Ford was going to say what he said, which was, I'm sorry, we made a mistake, and we're putting all the Greenbelt land back?
On the drive there, I really did not. I have spent the last few weeks really thinking about the question of why is the land that was removed not being returned to the Greenbelt, because, well, that's really kind of been the $1 million question since the Auditor General's report, because really, that was August 9th, so we're a month and a half into this, and had the decision that was made yesterday by the government happened then, well, then there might be a few more cabinet ministers left. There might be a little less chaos. And so it has really been confusing why that decision wasn't made earlier, which was sort of why I didn't see it coming until kind of, getting word of rumors a few minutes before the Premier spoke. But yeah, it really, now in hindsight, I've heard people say, oh, this was inevitable. I don't think it seemed inevitable because of how kind of dug in the Premier and the government seemed to be up until yesterday. But yeah, it certainly came by surprise yesterday of all days.
Well, let's backtrack then, because you mentioned days, months, years. It feels like when you cover these kind of stories. But this kind of does go back to last November, right, when the Ford government announced that they were going to remove about 4,700 acres of protected land from the Greenbelt, all part of this plan to build what they say much needed housing in the province. Let's start from there, Charlie. For those who don't understand, why was that such a significant announcement and triggered so many journalists to start digging?
Yeah, well, that really goes back to 2018 when when Doug Ford was PC leader, and the PCs were trying to win that provincial election to unseat 15 years of Liberal governments. And it was, of course, during that election campaign when the video sort of resurfaced from the Premier from earlier in that year, when he told a room of at a private event that if the PCs were elected, they'd open up the Greenbelt. That when that resurfaced during the 2018 election, there's a bunch of backlash, and that's when the premier, made not the premier yet, but that's when Ford made the promise that, we won't touch the Greenbelt. And that, remained the case throughout the Ford government's first mandate until, obviously that changed. And so it was sort of that broken promise that was such a big deal last November.
It wasn't long before journalists, Charlie, including yourself, started looking into the developers who owned some of the removed land. What did you find?
Yeah, so it's really to the credit of some of the reporters at the Narwhal and the Toronto Star specifically. There was reporting elsewhere as well. I think CBC was in on it in November. So, within, I think, a couple of weeks after the land removals were proposed, there was a bunch of connections discovered between the developers who own the land, their donations histories to the PCs, personal connections, the timing of when land was purchased, being within the last few years, all tons of things that really raised a lot of flags and sort of brought it to the forefront of the discussion here in the Ontario political world.
And then, of course, the revelations of Doug Ford's daughter's wedding and the stag. You led the way on that. What did you find there?
Yeah, so that actually came to mind, I guess, right when the proposal to remove these lands happened in November, because I've explained this before, so I won't go so far into the details, but it was the previous summer when I had first heard about some sort of developers party, as it was told to me at the time, at the Premier's house. Didn't really do too much poking around on it back in summer 2022. But when the Greenbelt changes were announced, I kind of thought to myself, oh, wow, I should really double back to that. And so from really the end of 2022, before the Christmas holiday, and through the early part of the beginning of this year, spent a good amount of time, doing all the reporting that, eventually brought to light the fact that, the Premier, his daughter, who got married the summer before this last one, that at the Stag and Doe that the Premier hosted before it, that there were various developers there. We now know through the Integrity Commissioner's work that there were two who owned land that was removed from the Greenbelt. One of those developers, Shakir Rahmatullah, he was at the Premier's daughter's wedding last September as well. That sort of came out in February. And I guess that was sort of the next big part of this controversy.
And, a lot of people even ask me, why are journalists poking around at this? Why does this matter? And I think it's a fair question. It's a dumb question to me, but why is it so important for us to understand the connections between wealthy, powerful people and the politicians that we elect? Right.
Well, it's rather interesting, right? Like, I don't do this job to. I sort of joke that I'm a lifestyle reporter sometimes, but I don't want to report on weddings and bachelor parties and whatnot. But it's what happened is what happened, and so I think it became really clear to me around that time that these sort of personal connections do matter, and. Through Auditor General and Integrity Commissioner reports, now I think that's especially clear.
So, Charlie, as all this is happening, there are two separate investigations going on by provincial watchdogs, Ontario's Auditor General and the Integrity Commissioner. In a nutshell, what did they conclude?
Yeah, so both of them in very, similar investigations leading to reports written in very different ways. Concluded that the former housing minister's chief of staff, whose name is Ryan Amato, that he had essentially, really overseen and ran this, very secretive process during the fall of 2022, so very early in the Ford government's second mandate. To very quickly and in a very unusual way as far as government processes go, determine which lands were going to be removed. We know in very much detail how he came into these specific properties. Lots of people are probably familiar with the Building Industry and Land Development Association dinner, where he received packages from developers. There was USB keys. There was emails from developers and their lobbyists directly to him. So those revelations, things that many journalists like myself had been kind of hunting down for many months, those came to the public thanks to the Auditor General and the Integrity Commissioner.
And of course, no political scandal will be complete without some reference to Las Vegas, right? So, and this has to be, I don't want to say my favorite part, but the most fascinating part to me, and this is all your reporting. And this is back in the summertime, in June, I believe, right? You reported on a trip to Las Vegas. Explain to our listeners what you found and why that was relevant.
Yeah, so the reporting of that dates back, sort of months before. I guess it was kind of as a follow-up to the Stag and Doe reporting. I talk to lots of people every day, and people come out of the woodwork here and there. And so I had sort of caught wind of the possibility of this trip, in the spring, worked on it through the summer, figured out, details here and there. And it led us to a point late in June. I think June 29th is when we published the first story about the Las Vegas trip. It was sort of very challenging to confirm. What's happened since has been very confusing, and there were. Of course, in the Integrity Commissioner's report, that's where a lot of this was sort of brought back up, because the Integrity Commissioner, based off the reporting that we had done on that, looked into this trip as part of his work in his larger Greenbelt investigation. Yeah. And what he heard was a very different story about what happened in Vegas than we reported. But we were confident in that reporting, sort of revisited it, drummed up some new evidence. And that's, since led to at least two of the four who had, given under oath testimonies about that trip, going back to the Integrity Commissioner to fix what they said to, collect.
And let me cut you off there too, Charlie. I just want to repeat what Charlie just said. The reporting that the Trillium did was so important to the Integrity Commissioner that the Integrity Commissioner's office wanted to do their own questioning of these people to find out what happened. They basically read Charlie's story and said, well, we better haul these guys in and talk to them, right?
As far as I understand it.
And so just so we clear to people, the trip was 3 people connected to the government and a developer. Who was there?
Yeah, so the 3 connected to the government is Khalid Rashid, the now former member of Doug Ford's cabinet. A guy named Amin Massoudi, who was the principal secretary to the premier at the time of this trip in early 2020, and another man named Jay Truesdale, who at the time of the trip was he wasn't working in the government at the time. He was in between stints working in the private sector, and he was, up until this week, the premier's director of housing policy. So that's the 3 of them. The developer is Shakir Rahmatullah, who I think I mentioned earlier. He's pretty prevalent throughout the Integrity Commissioner's larger Greenbelt report, because he owns land that was removed from the Greenbelt.
And what's interesting to me, like you said, is this reporting came out in the summertime, a big story for the Trillium, our team at Queen's Park. And then the story kind of bubbled back up because it mentioned in the Integrity Commissioner's report. But then also you did some further reporting showing that maybe some of the things that were said to the Integrity Commissioner were not quite accurate. And that caused a couple of them to actually go back to the Integrity Commissioner and say, well, I want to correct something. Is that the way it unfolded?
Yeah, and so, the day that the Integrity Commissioner's report came out on August 30th, we saw that there was details about this in the report because of the interviews Integrity Commissioner J. David Wake did with the trip goers. On that date, we sort of set it aside because of how much else was in the report, but it was sort of that evening that I looked over what they said about the trip. It obviously did not align with what we reported. Really what I knew to be true, and so that both because of the importance of challenging incorrect information under oath, but our reporting was being called into question based on their testimonies, and so essentially we were kind of forced to look back into it.
So let's try to count how many people have resigned then throughout this process. Who have we lost?
Throughout the entirety?
Or in the last month or so, there's been a lot of people leaving.
Yeah, so Ryan Amato, the former housing minister's chief of staff, he resigned on August 22nd. Steve Clark, the housing minister, he resigned on September 4th. Khalid Rashid, he resigned on, I believe, this Wednesday. And Jay Truesdell, the Premier's former director of housing policy, he resigned this week.
I don't want to say that it's vindicating because, like you said, we're not journalists are out there trying to tell the truth. We're trying to understand what happens and report the facts. But when you see this many people resign, does it make you feel like, well, I knew that this was an important story. I knew there was a reason why we were chasing this down?
Yeah, I've been getting lots of texts this week, and some of them are congratulations, and I don't really know how to respond to those because it is strange. Like we're not here to make anyone lose their job. Is that a signal of us doing the right work? I would think so, but it's kind of a strange feeling. It's certainly, I would say vindicating is the right word to describe. Other media picking this up, and there being, especially because like what we had reported again was challenged and under oath, and that's what made that's what sort of raised the stakes, because it was so unbelievable that these testimonies given under oath, contrary to our reporting, wouldn't be true. But we know that to be the case now.
And Charlie, I guess one other resignation that came out Friday, Monty McNaughton, but of course, yes. Word is that's not related to the Greenbelt.
Yeah, he and the Premier's office in each of their statements said that, like you said, Scott, unrelated. The timing, of course, is rather interesting, not only because of the whole Greenbelt scandal and controversy and whatnot, but also because we're just days away from the return of the sitting at Queen's Park. And so whoever it is that fills that role, same goes with Khalid Rashid's, there's going to be some shuffling around in Premier Ford's cabinet, and that's rather unusual to happen just a few days before, question period starts back up, and these ministers are expected to, know their files quite well.
So that kind of brings us back to Thursday afternoon in Niagara Falls, where the Premier says what he says. I don't know if it's an unfair question, Charlie, but was it just the constant dealings with this file being in the headlines every day that the Premier realized he just had to backtrack on this? Or what are you hearing? Why did he decide that this was the time finally to apologize and say we're going to put it all back?
I think it's a number of things. He came out yesterday and said that he had heard from members of his caucus about what they were hearing in their communities about this decision. And I think that's true and real. I also think that Premier Ford is someone who this is part of his brand. He's not afraid of going back on decisions when they're not received well. I think that's something that people actually quite like about him as a politician. This one is a bit strange because this isn't some same day, next day flip flop or whatever. This is something that they have held or they have stood by for almost a year now. I think the turn in public opinion that we've experienced in the last 2 months since lots of these revelations have come out, I think that played a role. But I also think, there's still the possibility of an RCMP investigation. There's still other provincial watchdog investigations that may be happening into this. And in terms of making the decision yesterday to to walk this back, it stops the bleeding in some sense.
Mm-hmm. So, Charlie, Doug Ford obviously didn't resign, and he says it will be up to the people come election time to decide his fate. In the interim, though, what do you think that will do as far as popularity polls, and what is the impact on Doug Ford?
Yeah, well, he's taken he and the PCs have taken a significant hit in the polls. There was a fascinating moment to me, I think it was last week at a press conference by Premier Ford, when he was asked about the effect this has had on, how Ontarians view his government. And he answered right away he said, we're at 38-39%. And, he said something similar to what he said yesterday about, voters can judge us. I believe, according to him last week, 38-39% would still get the PCs a majority. I do think that these last couple of months have the opposition parties, their war rooms, they've got a lot of their election ads probably already cut and written. So, we're very far away from a provincial election still. So I don't think that this issue will loom as large as if, an election was in a few months from now, but it's impossible to predict how much sort of impact it'll have come the next vote.
Selfishly, I just want to talk about the Trillium for a minute. For those who don't know, the Trillium is where you work. It's our Village Media's bureau at Queen's Park. Been around since early in the new year. And I just have been in awe of the work we've done since we've launched there, and it's very little to do with me, nothing to do with me at all. But just in awe of the work we've done. We broke so many big stories and are just explaining provincial politics to our readers in a way that nobody else is. And I have to be honest, the Trillium was mentioned on the National in their reporting and CBC. The Globe and Mail stories credited the Trillium. How's that been, Charlie? I mean, are people starting to realize how new we are, but we're doing some great work?
Yeah, it's been good. It's good to feel recognized and feel like making a difference and doing good work and whatnot. I like to say, it's nice to get your flowers. And this week the people of Ontario got 7,400 acres of flowers. So there you go.
All right, good stuff. Charlie Pinkerton from the Trillium. By the way, if you want to subscribe and read the great work that they continue to do day in and day out, trillium.ca. It's a great read, great investment. You'll love it. Charlie, take the afternoon off. I think you've earned it, man. Thanks for doing this.
I'm sure you have some phone calls to take as soon as you hang up here. So don't take the afternoon off.
Never ends. The show goes on.
For the latest in in-depth features and enterprise journalism from your local writers at Village Media, be sure to check out The Big Read. The Big Read. It's the full story behind the headlines. Look for The Big Read on your favorite Village Media website across Ontario.
Back to wrap on Inside the Village on this Monday. I'm Scott Sexsmith with Michael Friscoletti, editor-in-chief here at Village Media. And I guess these stories are what people in journalism live for, right? This is the Super Bowl, this is the Stanley Cup final, and a guy like Charlie Pinkerton is certainly the MVP.
And it's funny, you don't know when it's going to be when you cover these kind of political scandals. They go on for months, as this one did, and you're just chipping away. And as Charlie alluded to, it's a real grind of just finding out information. Like he mentioned, you're talking to this person, you're talking to that person, you're hearing things, you're trying to confirm things, you're getting people reaching out to you to suggest where you might want to follow these crumbs over there, and sometimes they're worth it, sometimes it's not. So there's a whole process going on, and it's just a lot of talking to people, right, and trying to figure out what you can and cannot confirm. And this has been one of those stories that has kind of inched its way forward day after day. Great reporting from including our team at the Trillium, but from other journalists as well, just showing what happened here. And it's just, I don't know, it's, I don't want to say funny, but the Premier decides now's the time to say, I'm very, very sorry, and I'm going to put it all back. And you're like, well, this has been going on for a long time. Why now?
Yeah, and Charlie brings up a good point, too, that, the next provincial election is still, 3 years away, so lots can change between now and then. The Premier, by his own admission, said, hey, we're still at 38, 39% in the polls, which, as Charlie said, could likely be enough for another majority. So maybe those 3 years between now and that election, people forget about stuff. People move on. It's true. It'd be interesting to see.
We have short attention spans, that's for sure. And as Charlie said, you really stop the bleeding with a press conference like that. And 2 cabinet ministers, 2 senior staffers, people are dropping here, right? And at some point, you do have to kind of stop the bleeding, as Charlie said.
Yeah, they seem to be dropping all around the Premier. Yet the Premier still standing tall. All right, that's a great show. Charlie doing some fabulous work as he and the entire staff at the Trillium continue to do day in and day out. Again, the Trillium.ca, log on and subscribe for some great political reporting by Charlie and the staff there. Okay, ITV at villagemedia.ca. If you'd like to reach out to Frisco, myself, Derek when he's back, Drew in the interim, ITV at villagemedia.ca. Find all of our episodes at insidethevillage.ca. You can also find them across the Village Media Network or wherever you subscribe to your favorite podcasts. Thanks for watching this week. We'll be back again next week with another installment of Inside the Village.
You've been listening to Inside the Village.
Frisco and Scott's Wardrobe, provided in part by Moores, Sault Ste. Marie.